Abandoned by my parents, I secretly bought their house and tripled the rent to rewrite my own destiny. Things began to go downhill or uphill, depending on your perspective. I worked part-time in a low-paying grocery store at 22 to finish my degree. Greg and Sarah, my parents, pressured me like they owned my life. Every day, they pushed me toward their ideal. They thought they knew best, yet didn't know my wishes. I stealthily ate my mom's overcooked meatloaf at dinner on Thursdays, though it felt like chewing cardboard. I didn't say anything for fear of a sermon on my ungratefulness. Dad abruptly asks, "How's that business degree?" in his usual faux-concerned dad man. Though preparing, I knew this talk would happen. My stomach fell as my heart raced. Rip off the bandage. I set my fork down, staring at the clump of peas I'd been pushing around my plate like a 5-year-old. About that, I shakily responded. I've contemplated changing majors. The room fell silent. The hallway clock ticked. Then I knew what was coming. Changing majors? My dad nearly gags on his face. Only when angry would he glow scarlet. Yeah, I want to switch to computer science, I said, trying to communicate clearly. It felt like a firing squad before I finished. My mom answered sarcastically. Greg, thinking's never been your strong suit, she joked, smiling tightly. We all knew it wasn't. She often jokes, pretending to laugh. I sat there swallowing rage. I wanted to yell at them and tell them they were wrong, but I knew better. There would be more ranting, and I didn't want an argument. Dad continued. His fork shook as it hit the table. Computer science? Are you crazy? Business makes money. That foolish hobby is ruining your future. I tried to explain. It's not a pastime, Dad. I like it and think I can do well. You think. He disconnected again. Passion costs nothing, Greg. You're reckless. Think forward instead of doing what you want now, my mom agreed, feeding the fire. No more childhood. Don't play with your future. They didn't care about my wishes. As a project, any deviation from their design meant ruining. Nobody considered that I might know what was best for me. After dinner, I collapsed on my bed after slamming the door like a burden on my chest, calling Riley on my phone. She alone understood my condition. How did it go? She asked, knowing the outcome. Like a freaking disaster, I murmured, rubbing my eye. I told them, and they went berserk like I told them I was skipping off to join a circus. She responded by sighing. Greg, defend yourself, your life, not theirs. You owe them nothing. Yes, but they're my parents, not that easy. I get it, she muttered. But Greg, you're 22. No more childhood. Own your life, or they'll run it for you. While staring at the ceiling, I realized she was right. I should act like a grown-up. The next morning, I felt dread and resolve as I informed them honestly that they could no longer dominate me. My pulse raced as I went downstairs and discovered them watching TV in the Levi-ing room. Mom, Dad, we need to talk, I said shakily but firmly. After my dad muted the TV, everybody looked at me like they expected big news, which it was. Switching to computer science, Dad frowned. You're not. I persisted. This time I chose this as I hoped they would give me it, but Mom stood up with her arms crossed. If you're an adult, you can support yourself, she said coldly. You have 24 hours to pack. I was riveted, like my brain couldn't comprehend what she said. What? I succeeded? You can't be serious, my dad snaps. Oh, we're serious. You want to decide? Fine. You're doing it alone. I forget my walk back to my room, but I felt betrayed, like they were looking for an excuse to push me out. I was their son, but they treated me like garbage. I called my best friend Kane from my room without trying to talk. Well, I said, dude, they kicked me out, shaking my hand. I don't know what to do. Kane immediately said, pack your stuff, man. Stay with me. I discovered it while packing my clothing in a duffel bag. My parents threw me away like trash. Despite how bizarre it sounds, I felt relieved. They no longer controlled me. Not sure what that meant. I slept in Kane's house trying to figure out what happened after getting expelled, but it felt like my life had changed from fighting with my parents about my major to being homeless. Felt unreal, like someone else was experiencing. I didn't mind Kane's one-bedroom apartment that smelled like stale pizza and exercise socks because I had a roof and a friend who wouldn't ask me to leave. I couldn't crawl to my parents for help because it was too cramped. Every movement made Kane's old couch rattle where I slept. Every time I finished my homework, my mind would replay what happened. It seemed like my mind wouldn't let me forget I didn't have a home. My SAVYNGS were draining fast. I needed to work more. I couldn't balance 2 jobs, school, and life. Riley recommended we eat lunch at a cheap sandwich cafe near Kane's to relax after she couldn't fix my problem. As I hadn't eaten much since Leah VYing home, I figured going out might help. How are you doing? she inquired, eating her sandwich. I shrugged. Honestly, not good. I can't concentrate at school, and my money is running out. I doubt I can continue. She gave me the compassionate look everyone has given me since I told them what happened. Greg, you're trying? Just a blip. Joyless laughter. Yes, a mountain-sized bump. She held my hand across the table. You'll understand. You've always been brilliant, even if your parents don't know. Her kind words didn't change the fact that I was stuck in a situation I couldn't escape. I felt like I was treading water to avoid drowning. After lunch, I worked on my assignments at Canes, but as I looked at the computer screen, I realized I was getting behind. My grades were decreasing, and I was considering dropping out. I didn't want to, but other options were running out. After several weeks of no improvement, my money fell, and I realized I had to choose. Kane could only cover so much, and I couldn't keep freeloading on him. Leah VYing college seemed like GI VYing up all I'd worked for. Signing the paperwork in the dean's office made me feel like a failure. My aim of being the first in my family to graduate college was disappearing like everything else. After Leah VYing that office, I realized I had no degree, strategy, or money. I gazed at my phone on Kane's couch that night, unsure what to do. Riley always called to check on me. The plan? She whispered. I keep looking for work, but nothing comes through, like every door is closing on. My caller hesitated, clearly trying to cheer me up. You won't give up. I don't have a choice, I said, trying to speak clearly. Today, I dropped out. Oh, Greg, she said, the end is not here. Find something. I know you will. I wanted to trust her, but was losing hope. For days, I applied for every job I could find, but Sunnyside Restaurant, a decrepit restaurant that hadn't been cleaned since the 1980s, was the only one that offered anything. Flipping burgers and mopping floors was better than nothing since I needed money. I had something. Despite the long hours and minimal money, Ned, my manager, barked directives like boot camp as I pounded grease-covered burgers on the grill. Maybe Ned witnessed my hard work. He was tough and only cared about money. After a month at the diner, Ned approached me during a break. Nice work ethic, child. 1 more hours? My forehead was sweaty, so I wiped it off to look engaged. My friend needs a better-paying night guard at this downtown office building. You in? No consideration required. Yes, I'm in. Flipping burgers by day and guarding an empty building at night. Though unglamorous, it was something. I stopped affording sleep and was exhausted most nights, barely able to open my eyes, but I had to serve VYV. Riley kept sending me links to tech internships to get me back on track, but I didn't have time or energy to apply. I live for Serve VY Val now. Every night, as I sat in that dark, empty office building staring at the city's flashing lights, I wondered, how did my life become this way? A few months earlier, I had aspirations and a future. Now I was served VYing one shift at a time. The worst part was seeing no way. 2 jobs were hell. The cafe was filthy, and the nights in that empty office building were mind-numbing. I lived in a beat-up knapsack, slept 4 hours a night, and sipped energy drinks like water. I was making money, not much, but enough to keep me going. Ken didn't say anything, but I think he was glad I could help with it. I didn't want to be the guy freeloading off my closest as my life went apart, so I handed him everything a random me. Things changed quickly when this guy came in for lunch while flipping burgers at the I don't know if it was chance or the Universe Pro VY gave me a break. First, I didn't notice, just another customer. He looked fatigued, like the rest of us who worked too many hours for inadequate pay. After supper, he paid at the counter and gazed at the computer screen behind the register. As I gave him his change, I practiced coding on break to keep sharp. He asked casually but suspiciously, "You're into coding?" I nodded, trying not to look thrilled. I taught myself, hopefully it will be a career. I could have something for you. My organization requires entry-level at professional. Not fancy, but a start. I blinked, questioning what I heard. Seriously? Yes, he shrugged. Send me your resume. I'll represent you. I accepted his business card, shaking, hoping for a bit of hope after month. That night, I ignored my double-shift exhaustion and started my laptop resume, which was imperfect but something. I wrote Mick before overthinking it and try not to get hopeful. Turning point, after a few days, I believed he was being nice and I wouldn't be called. One afternoon, while working my night shift in that dreary abandoned office, my phone buzzed. It was a company email. I hesitated to open the screen before responding with an enter VYEW in VY Tatayon. It was shocking to go from flipping burgers and guarding vacant buildings to perhaps working it. I rode the bus to work after stealing Kane's fine clothing and joining a modest, unassuming business that appeared like a new planet. After a basic inner VYEW, Troy from the diner greeted me at the door and introduced me to Tara, his super VY soar. Tara was fierce but fair. I informed her I had self-taught coding and it without a degree. She was first disappointed by my small efforts, but she then asked me to fix a technical issue promptly, which I had never done. I panicked, but then I remembered all those late evenings I spent training and coding challenges for fun. I exhaled slowly and worked, trying not to feel pressurized. After I finished, Tara nodded and gazed at Troy without saying much. She said, "He's got potential, give him a shot." Despite feeling like my heart was ready to explode, I tried to stay cool. New beginning. The following week, I started as an entry-level person. It wasn't glamorous, but I didn't care. For the first time in months, I wasn't selling burgers or guarding scary office buildings at 3 a.m. I was doing something I enjoyed. For the first time in months, and Tara and Troy patiently taught me and encouraged me to study. Not being held hand through everything was perfect. To prevent losing this opportunity, I worked at the startup all day and went to the diner or office at night. Sleep was rare, and most mornings I felt like a car had hit me. I couldn't have served VY Ved without Riley, who gave me job leave and checked on startup. She reminded me that I was building something for myself when I felt like I was falling apart. After months of beating, I broke. I couldn't work 2 jobs and be sane, so I quit. Ned was sad but understood. "Good luck, kid," he said earnestly. "You work hard. You'll be fine." It was amazing to leave the diner. I worked security nights when I wasn't at the business, but I wasn't burning out as fast. Over time, I dedicated every free moment to acquiring new skills, performing projects, and absorbing knowledge. I was constructing something genuine mine. I wondered if I was following a pipe dream, but every time I overcame a challenge or solved a problem that had stumped me for hours, that spark returned, long missing fire. It took time for me to see my future again. I wanted my future, not my parents'. First time in years, that was enough. Some months into the new job, things felt different, not bad, just different from what I'd felt in a while. Finally doing something I liked. I wasn't going to a dead-end job. Code and fix it were fun, but not glamorous, get something I worked hard for. Tara went to my workstation one afternoon while I was programming. I loved her directness. She said, "Greg, I've been following your work for months. You have promised you're holding back." I glanced at her shocked. "Holding back? You mean what?" She crossed her arms and looked like she knew the answer, but wanted me to say it. "You're talented, but you're cautious and adhere to familiarity. You lack risk-taking and pushing. Being comfortable is good, but comfort doesn't work in business." I was unclear what to say. She was right. I was doing the work, but not well. After everything, I was grateful to be stable and not mess up. Tara replied, "Look, Greg, you're good, but you need to improve to stand out. Try scary projects, you grow that way." I nodded, still understanding her work. This wasn't my parents' counsel to quit wasting my ability. This indie VY dual saw it and encouraged me. I followed her ad VYC and volunteered for harder jobs I wasn't sure I could handle. I occasionally felt overwhelmed, but sole VYing an issue was worth it. Tara handed me a big client job. I was scared since it was more responsibility than I'd ever had, but I was excited to prove I could do it. After weeks of late nights, weekends, and free time to perfect the project, I felt like I had run a marathon. I was exhausted, but I felt stronger. Several days later, Tara in VY-TED me into her office. I sat down anxious about making a mistake. She acted swiftly. "Greg, your client liked your work. Every suggestion you made is being implemented." Unknowingly, I exhaled. "Really?" She nodded with a little smile. "You did great. Keep going, and you'll succeed." I leave her office, and I felt 10 feet tall. I thrived for the first time in forever and saw a future of building instead of scraping by. As I pushed harder, I understood how much I was holding back, not only in my career but in life. This cloud lifted, and I could see what I could do if I stopped afraid. Mistakes were in the VY table, but they taught and progressed me. Riley was always supportive, but she suddenly seemed proud of me instead of grumbling about my poor work. I'd talk about my new project or something fantastic I learned at dinner. She'd listen, really listen, like she could see I was on my way. After a long week at work, we sat on her couch one night. I was exhausted but happy. She smiled. She said, "I always knew you'd get here. Maybe not as planned, but you're doing it. You make it happen." I didn't know how to answer. She was with me through the worst, when I didn't know whether I'd make rent or where my next salary would come from. She made me feel safe and valued. Hearing her say that, I understood how lucky I was. Thanks, I said forcefully. I don't think I'd have made it this far without you. You would have, she laughed, shaking her head. A push was all you needed. She may have been right, but her presence helped. Then things got better. I took on more duties and improved, and others noticed. Every time I finished one of Tara's harder assignments, I felt more confident. For the first time in years, I felt secure. I stopped security and wasn't making much money, but I wasn't afraid about my next. Tara summoned me into her office again one afternoon. I expected another extravagant project, but she had a serious look I hadn't seen before. She said, "Greg, I want to talk to you about your future here," calmly but directly. Unsure of the direction, I arched an eyebrow. "Okay." She LED in her chair. "You've done well in recent months. I think you're ready for more. I wish to make you full-time." After she started, I sat there, trying to process it. Full-time a dream, no more juggling jobs, or scraping by. I don't even know what to say. I smiled. Just say, yes, I did. After Leah VYing that office, I felt lighter. All the strain, sleepless nights, and self-doubt were worth it. I arrived though not as planned, and that felt good. Being promoted to full-time was like VY sighting a new plan. For the first time, I felt like I was doing something meaningful for myself and others without working a miserable side job. It was steady. After attaining that milestone, work got frantic. Tara meant it when she said I'd get additional responsibilities. I led teams for the first time and managed impossible deadlines on larger projects. My to-do list sometimes made me worry how I would do it all, but I had to. Every day was a challenge, but it was the kind that made me feel alive. It was significant and to be trusted to do the job while still learning. Tara summoned me into her office again one afternoon. Every time she did, I felt like I was in school waiting to pass or fail a test. She looked serious, and I wondered if I'd done something wrong. She added, "Greg, I've got another project for you," pushing a folder over the desk. I took it and flipped through. The new customer was a big company modernizing. It's an infrastructure bigger than anything I'd done before. My stomach flipped when excited and scared. "This is a lot," I said, trying to seem confident but not arrogant. "I think you're ready," Tara nods. "I need you to guide the organization through this major undertaking." "Guide it?" I was shocked. I worked hard, but heading a project looked advanced. I said, "I won't let you down," feeling her faith. "I know you won't," she said, smiling briefly. Next week was my busiest. I worked nights and weekends at work, making sure everything was fine. My staff was excellent, but I couldn't let anyone down. Down under pressure, Ashley was wonderful, although I was rarely around, and a zombie. She brought takeout to work, sat with me, and reminded me to take breaks. "You're going to burn out if you don't slow down," she warned. I adored this idea and thought it would change my career and life if I succeeded. I had to prove myself, not Tara or the firm, that I could handle this. I barely slept the night before the client presentation, mentally double and triple checking everything to make sure there were no loose ends. I felt like all my tension and anxiety from the years had built up to this moment, and I was about to do something significant. The next morning, I entered the boardroom to find the clients in suits and ties, looking serious. I put up my presentation to calm my nerves, but it seemed like my career hinged on this. Tara sat at the head of the table, watching me. I breathed deeply, comforted myself, and started the lecture. I stumbled over a few words and slides, but I answered their questions, explained the idea, and showed why they required this update. During what seemed like an eternity, no one talked. They scanned the documentation and whispered. My stomach flipped, and I half expected them to take everything apart. The department said, "This looks good," and nodding, "We'll proceed." I was astonished and wanted to jump up and fist pump like a fool, but I nodded like it was just another day at work, yelling with joy. Tara took me aside after the meeting. "Great work," she said, beaming. "You've earned this." Her praise, or the fact that I finished my largest assignment, hit me harder. I felt like I'd passed an unseen finish line after months. I left the office that night, relieved. I didn't care that I'd probably be back there in the morning working on something else. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was where I should be. On my way home, I excitedly called Riley. "We did it, babe. The presentation was well received. We're proceeding." Pride showed in her laughter. "You what I knew. So proud of you, Greg." Hearing that made it real. I wasn't the lost, fearful kid who'd been kicked out of his parents' house. I'd built something for myself on my terms. There was less uncertainty about the future. I thrived, not just her VY Ved, and that feeling was all worth it. I went from struggling to excelling in it a few years after that big job assignment, And I was surprised when I started my own firm after working for a while. I had a good reputation, saved money, and made connections, so I was ready to jump. Starting my own business was hard. There were restless nights, countless paperwork, and constant worry that everything might fail. I felt this was my calling, so I kept going. I got contracts, built a small but solid crew, and the company took off. After 2 years, we made more money than I expected. I didn't serve burgers or protect vacant buildings. I grew my firm every month I had built. Riley and I contemplated buying a house when my company took off. After years of renting, we wanted our own home. We looked at ads, attended weekend open houses, and fantasized about our ideal. Seeing my boyhood house, which my parents still live in, for sale prevented me from surfing real estate sites. I was surprised to discover their house for sale. I hadn't spoken to them in years and didn't follow their life. I clicked on the advertisement to learn more. Their landlord had sold the property at a discount compared to surrounding homes. I suddenly had a crazy idea by the house who buys their parents' house after EVY tie-in. It seemed petty, but they didn't know I had money or was considering buying a property. This could be my chance to reclaim control over a situation that had kept me powerless. I called my realtor and placed a bid without hesitation. It was inexpensive, and I had the money to accomplish it. A few weeks later, the purchase closed, and I acquired my childhood home. And now things get interesting. The property manager called me the day after the deal. The tenants are asking to meet. The new owner said they want to discuss the rent and some issues they've been HVYing. I grinned. Internally, good things were coming, not telling them. I told property management to make the appointment. Plan was in my brain. After parking my car in front and knocking like a landlord, Dad answered the door. He was surprised, but didn't recognize me because we hadn't seen each other in years. I didn't appear like the guy who left their house with a duffel bag and no plan. "We're here to meet the landlord," he exclaimed. "That's me," I said, entering like I owned it. He blinks in amazement. "Wait, what? You're the landlord?" "Yeah," I said, trying not to laugh. "I bought the place." My mom came from the living room wide-eyed. "Greg," she shouted, "why are you here?" I smiled and leaned against the wall. "Well, I'm your landlord now." They were speechless, still absorbing the fact that the boy they kicked out years before owned their house. Though I wasn't celebrating, it seemed fair. Business was my obligation. I began, so breaking the awkward quiet about the rent. They stared at me unprepared. I stated, "I'm tripling it," calmly. Dad was stunned. "Triple it? You're kidding." I replied, "Oh, I'm dead serious. Property values have risen, so I need a reasonable return on my investment. Rent is rising a lot." Mom shook and reasoned with me. "Greg, we can't afford that. You know we can't." I shrugged. "That's not my issue. You can pay the new rent or move. Up to you." Though tough, I wouldn't back down. Years ago, they kicked me out, so now I set the terms. The stunned couple may have realized they had no choice but to stand there with no credit and no option. I left after an awkward talk to let them figure things out. I drove away feeling satisfied, vindicated, and hollow. Proved them wrong and succeeded despite everything they did to me. But as I drove away from that house, I realized that rent hikes and property ownership couldn't fix it. This was about release, not revenge. I wouldn't lower rent.